Hi everyone, welcome to the BarberShop. For me, it is like fanboy moment after moment because the business just blows you away. The energy of the entrepreneur blows you away. What they're building is just massive and so purposeful. And today we have the founder of the Masters Union, Pratham. Welcome to the BarberShop and thank you so much for taking the time.
Of course, thanks so much for having me. My family business professor at college used to say this, that the first generation builds it, the second generation grows it, and the third generation brings it down to the ground.
The fact that you've gotten people like Tanmay Bhatt and Karan Johar and people from NASA on their time, but for your students, is another fascinating thing that I took away when I came to you guys.
Another thing, I think education is considered to be a content problem. That somehow this content has to be transformed from me, the teacher, to you, the student. It's actually not a content problem. It's a motivation problem.
You're telling me that the utilization of a IIM classroom is abysmally
It's less than 20%. Less than 20%. They're empty most of the time. People use it for their own studies.
Yeah.
Akele baith ke main classroom mein baith ke padh lunga.
In a century, that's what they say, right? When I think Sachin said this, when I scored a century, my first boundary was important because that gave you the confidence to build. Hi everyone, welcome to the BarberShop. Very few times I meet a young entrepreneur for the first time, and for me it is like fanboy moment after moment because the business just blows you away. The energy of the entrepreneur blows you away. What they're building is just massive and so purposeful. And that was the experience I had when I went to the Masters Union. And today we have the founder of the Masters Union, Pratham. Welcome to the BarberShop and thank you so much for taking the time.
Of course, thanks so much for having me.
We have, I met you for an hour, but in that 1 hour, I was blown away by what you are doing at the Masters Union and the way you're building it, your approach to education. So I think for some time, I just want to go deep and understand the business you're building and how you're thinking about being a top 10 business school in the world.
Yeah.
I don't know what the time period for that aspiration.
5 years from today.
5 years from today.
7 years in the beginning.
So the qualifying batch of 2029 should enter.
That should be the one.
Top 10.
That should be the one.
Talk about that aspiration, that vision, and how you're making it come to life.
No, I think in India we don't have a single university in the top 250.
Okay.
Forget about top 100 or top 10. Even top 250 we don't have. And I think ISB Bangalore features in a very consolatory way in the 250 to 300 band.
Okay.
They don't even get a rank. They just get a band.
Okay.
And so, and I was like, why is that the case, right? And the reason that we figured out is not because of a dire lack of funding. There are many universities that are in top 250 that don't have as much funding as some of the Indian institutions. It's not for lack of talent. I think clearly. I mean, that's not the problem, right? I think it's a lack of strategy.
Okay.
Very honestly. And we'll talk about why ranking is not just a vanity metric, why it's actually important for the larger economy as well. We'll come to that. But we thought, hey, listen, if we have the right strategy, if we figure out what are the ranking parameters and we hit the parameters where they hurt the most, perhaps we can do it in a much more capital efficient way and in a much more faster timeline. So we thought, let's gun towards a top 10 global B school ranking in 7 to 8 years of our existence. So 7 academic years, 8 financial years, if you will.
And what are the metrics on which?
It's very interesting. Almost 50% of the metric is placements driven. So how well are your graduates doing after they finish your MBA? And a big chunk of that 50% actually comes from this mathematical formula, which is post-MBA salary minus pre-MBA salary divided by pre-MBA salary. So your growth.
Oh, really?
Post-MBA minus pre-MBA.
Right. Wow, interesting. And what is that number? What's a good number for that?
So it's very interesting. Again, globally that number is not very high because in the US, in Western countries, your pre-MBA salary, let's say 100K,
okay,
80K. Post-MBA would be like 150K, 180K, 200K. So 2x
correct.
is considered to be very good in the US.
Correct.
But in India, think about IIMs and ISB and Masters Union and SPJs of the world. What we have going for us is that pre-MBA salary in India, just structurally speaking, is very low.
Very low, correct.
Right? I mean, most of our undergrad colleges, their placements happen at 3 lakhs, 4 lakhs.
Correct.
I mean, that's really the number there, right?
Correct.
And post-MBA for good schools, it's not that bad.
Correct.
Right? Because the PNGs and the Bains, McKinseys, Microsoft, they pay well.
Correct.
So in India, that number goes up to 4x, 5x also.
Wow.
Right.
So 50% is taken care of by a low baseline effect, basically.
Exactly. And very few people recognize that. So if you look at the ranking, and if you just look at one parameter, which is this salary percentage increase,
growth,
Indian institutions do really well. In fact, the number one Indian institution is the #1 global institution in that parameter, which is ISB.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's like the ranking. You can go onto the ranking today, just filter by this specific parameter, and ISB will be #1. Yet, in the overall ranking, we fall behind.
Because the other 50%?
Because the other 50% is different, right?
What is that?
The other 50%, a big chunk is research.
Okay.
Around 10 to 15% is research. And there we are not as strategic about the kind of research that we do. #1. Number 2, a lot of it is structural stuff, like what percentage of your student community is female?
Okay.
What percentage of your teaching community is diverse? What percentage of your board is international? What is the faculty mobility? What that means is how many of your faculty actually travel abroad for their research work or for their collaborations, and how many people from outside actually come to your campus. So all of these things is where we lose out on, right? And these things are actually in your control.
Correct.
Right? You can actually have a KPI assigned to one of your team members or one of the departments around this and hit that KPI really well. We just don't do it.
Wow. So is that the seeding trigger for starting the Masters Union, or was it something before that? I know. Let's go back a little bit. You've run a business in the US before the Masters Union. You ran a business in the content SaaS space in the US, fresh out of college. But what was that experience like in terms of some of the learnings you got building that business out in New York before you kind of came here and started this?
So actually that business was started as a class project.
Okay.
And it was a class project given to us by a professor called Adam Grant.
Okay.
And he's a very popular professor.
Of course.
And that project eventually became a product, and the product became a company.
Okay.
And we ended up running that company, me and my business partner, was Lebanese.
Okay.
Name is Randy, for almost 10 years after that. Now, that business was a hardcore SaaS business, right? And so all the same SaaS metrics, MRR, ARR, we are going to these trade shows and doing these stalls and selling our product, making sure NPS is high, making sure retention is high, making sure all. So I think running a SaaS business, it was a great MBA for me. I did not do my MBA, by the way. Super interesting. So running that SaaS business, I think taught me 3 or 4 things, basically. First, it taught me sales.
Okay.
In the US, selling your product is much harder than in India. Because in the US, you're competing with at least 5 more similar products. In India, generally, there are more white spaces in SaaS.
Correct.
Right? So in the US, we were competing with companies that were 10 times our size. And the only way we could beat them was through our energy and our charisma. Right? Because me and my business partner would do each sale ourselves. So I think sales was the first thing. I think second was this entire marketing funnel that takes place in SaaS. Now, SaaS is a business that can be automated, that can be templatized, that can be made very systematic. Right? There is little hustle that you can do in marketing, but there is a lot of process and structure that you can put. So all of our campaigns were dynamically optimized in real time. All of those things were happening. I think that is something I learned in the US, which even in India till today, I don't see a lot of companies doing. That amount of dynamic optimization. Every day the landing page is changing. Every day the conversion rates are improving. Every day the CACs are reducing. And the other thing was bootstrapping a company. So we tried to raise in the US, but since both of us were not American, it was very hard for us to raise.
Really?
Yeah, because people were not convinced that we'll get our H1Bs.
Okay.
And Randy was from Lebanon, so it was much harder for him.
Correct.
I eventually did get my H1B. But still, again, would it renew? Trump comes in. So all of these things always forced us to bootstrap. Could just never fundraise, even though the business was very healthy. We were profitable from year 2 onwards.
Okay.
But you could never fundraise. And so bootstrapping in the US is doubly hard, right? Because the salaries in the US are so much more expensive.
Correct.
So we tried to figure out this model where few of the team members are in India, working overnight, and few of the team members are in the US, and try to figure out this offshoring model. So I think bootstrapping, we learned a lot. We never had an office. We used to work from Randy's home.
Really?
And we used to live with his 2 brothers and his mother, which made for great Lebanese food. I'm obsessed with Lebanese food because I lived with them for so long. I think all of these things really taught me business 101 and discipline of doing a business. So when we came back to our respective countries, he went back to Lebanon, I came back to India.
This is pre-COVID?
This is just pre-COVID, yeah.
But you had run it for a sizable 8, 7, 9 years, right?
9 to 10 years, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, of course. Traveled the US doing that, started in New York, then built an office in LA, built an office in SF. Did that entire US, the American dream circuit. completed that. I think that was a huge learning. And I think that's when I realized that education, like real education, will only happen if you actually run a business. No books can teach you anything, even if they're taught by Adam Grant.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, you have to get your hands dirty, and only then will you learn something.
And you wanted to come in and start something in education, or did you want to do something in impact? Do you want to do something in impact through foundations, or did you want to build a for-profit venture, which was more enterprise in its formation?
I wanted to do something in education for sure, right? So education in India is such a hugely wide space, right? It's so empty. It's an empty canvas. You can do anything you want to do, right? There are very few high-quality institutions in India.
Okay.
But there's a huge demand for high-quality institutions. That's why students go abroad. This year, I think some 9 to 10 lakh students have gone abroad in search of better quality education. Right? So that's basically a market that you can easily retain in India if you create a few good institutions. And I was like, okay, let it be education. The other thing about education is that there's very little competition. Your competition is large legacy institutions.
Correct.
Right? And they don't consider you their competition.
Correct.
Right? So you can basically run at your own pace. And Ola is going to always be after Uber.
Correct.
Uber is always going to be after Ola.
Correct.
But here, if I come up with something new, no one's going to copy me for at least 3-4 years.
Correct.
You know, so all of these reasons were convincing enough for me to get into education. Also, as a business, education has very good gross margins.
Correct.
Right? And I was looking for a gross margin business whose profile matches that of SAAS. Was not going to happen in FMCG.
Correct.
Was not going to happen in other service sectors, in healthcare, etc. So it had to be education. And in terms of why we decided to do a for-profit versus a not-for-profit, we were very clear that we want to build a business school and not an engineering school.
Okay.
Right. That's where the large white space actually is. So in engineering, you can have IITs for undergrad. You'll have some SRM, VIT. These are good Manipal. They are good colleges, right?
Correct.
But if you talk about studying undergrad business, you don't have very many good colleges. You'll probably have SRCC.
Yeah.
You'd probably say Symbiosis or Christ.
Yeah.
And if you look at the average salaries that students get coming out of the institutions, it's incredibly low. It's in the vicinity of 3 to 6 lakhs. Right?
Yeah.
That's quite low. I mean,
correct.
At that salary, you can't really afford a nice place to live in.
Correct.
In a city like Delhi or Bombay or Bangalore, right?
Correct.
And so I thought, there's a very wide space there. So let's build a business school, both undergrad and postgrad.
Is there industrial demand for 21-year-old undergrads coming out of a business graduate degree? There's
a huge demand for skilled 21-year-olds, right? And there are 3 or 4 skills that all businesses need that don't get today.
Okay.
So for example, if you need an accounting executive today who knows P2P, R2R, O2C, which is procure to pay, order to cash, and record to report, which are 3 basic accounting principles, you will not get it today. You'll have to get the guy, and your CA guy will actually train that person.
Yeah.
You will not get him pre-baked.
Correct.
Right. Similarly for marketing, you'll have to train them at the job. You'll get high energy people. You'll get people who are open to learning with good attitude, but they're not coming very well trained. They're still learning 4 Ps. They're not really updated with what's happening latest at all, right?
Hands have not been dirty yet at all.
Zero. They still, if you look at some of the University of Delhi syllabi, the last reprint was in 1997. 97 marketing looked very different. It was a different project altogether.
Yeah,
right? Even accounting, no one uses those registers for accounting anymore. But that's how we are still teaching. We start with credit and debit, and by the time students understand credit and debit, they've lost interest. They're like, don't teach me the tool. Tell me what the problem this tool is solving first.
Correct.
Right? Elon Musk gives this example that if you're trying to teach someone how a refrigerator works, there are 2 ways to do it. First, you start with how a screwdriver works, and then what refrigeration is, and what are these, whatever heat transfer equations or whatever. Or the other thing you can do is give him a broken refrigerator and tell the person to tinker with it for 2 days, 3 days. The person will figure it out for himself or herself.
Correct.
And that's a much better way to learn. So anyways, we thought that business school is going to be, and let's make it for profit for 2 reasons. One is that it'll be much easier to raise capital.
Okay.
See, as an institution that's an NGO or a not-for-profit, it's very hard to raise money in India.
Compliance and a bunch of things.
Compliance is one thing, but in India to get CSR funding from companies is incredibly hard. it's easy to raise money from VCs. Genuinely.
That is true. That is true.
And
We've had a Kruti from People. I don't know whether you saw that episode.
Not
but
yet.
Kruti from People Education was on here, and every year it's just about kind of the same thing. You have to, one is raising money is harder. Number two, ability to measure return on capital, because there's no profit. So how do you really measure it? The proxy is skewed.
Yeah.
So completely agree. That's a big struggle for her, even though the work she's doing is phenomenal.
Yeah. No, even like, I mean, in the US, you know, these large corporates would give gifts to universities. In India, that doesn't happen. In India, if let's say I am a large business owner, like a large business promoter, won't take any names, instead of giving money to an existing university, they'd rather build their own university.
Correct.
And what that does is that takes money away from existing institutions who could have leveraged it better.
Correct.
And you started building a university from scratch. And the thing is, most of that money goes into buying the land and building the building, and not into education, not into research. Right? So I think, so we were very clear that we want to raise capital at some point in time. So let's structure ourselves as a for-profit. Right? That's number two. And number two is, if you're a business school, you cannot claim to be teaching business if your own business
is not a business.
is not a business.
Correct.
And so, you know, we hold ourselves very high standards in terms of our financials, right? In terms of our marketing, our content, in terms of our operations. So whatever we are trying to teach, we try to walk that talk as much as possible. And that keeps the faculty at high standards as well, because they can't just bullshit now.
Yeah.
They can't just say, in theory, mein aise hota hai. Bhai, tum to kar nahi rahe. The student will say, ki aap to kar nahi rahe. If I'm teaching students content marketing, teaching them interactive content marketing, I don't have the authority to teach that until I am practicing it myself.
But I was amazed to see the kind of faculty that you have gotten together. One is, of course, the infrastructure, like Masters Union, to base it in the heart of Gurgaon, in the most corporate building possible. But you have converted it into like a really beautiful campus, and then you have hostels which are like across the road. So traditional education intelligence would say that if you want to teach people in a campus environment, build the campus away from the city. I studied in NIT Nagpur and IIM. You know, both campuses were kind of secluded away from the city. So students are together and, you know, all of that. But the huge downside of that is access to industry is almost zero, right? Which you have solved for by saying access to industry is what we'll kind of create, but we'll do it in our own interesting way. The other thing that I find fascinating, Pratham, about Masters Union, by the way, I was talking to someone about Masters Union the other day, and this was the feedback I wanted to give you. This is probably what people think when they think of the brand. They thought it's a cross-border financial services business.
Like Western Union.
That is interesting.
Our colors are also the same, actually.
Black and yellow, right?
Yeah.
So yes, that's a side track. But the fact that you have gotten 100 plus faculty, people like Tanmay Bhatt and Karan Johar and people from NASA, so just super diversified, teaching specific courses on their time, but for your students, is another fascinating thing that I took away when I came to you guys. So talk about those two things. One is
location
and infra. The thinking about infra and access to industry, and second is how do you kind of think about tutelage through these 100
through practitioners. So location was actually very easy. See, the thing is that this campus university system was started with Oxford and Cambridge. They're situated far from London. And they are their own ecosystems. And it's great if you're into liberal arts, if you're studying history and philosophy and psychology, then you can work in isolation, right? You almost need that isolation because you want to be independent thinkers. You want to philosophize, you want to talk big picture, which you probably can't do in a city.
It's a Gurukul approach, right?
It's a Gurukul approach.
People go away.
Which is totally fine. Even in engineering, to an extent, that's acceptable. But when it comes to business, I think situating yourself away from the city is actually a disservice to the students, right? Because business schools are essentially trade schools. You know,
more?
Business schools are trade schools. You're actually trying to train students in specific business skills.
Correct.
That can be best learned by people who have done business before, right?
Absolutely. As an apprenticeship model.
It's an apprenticeship model. I mean, you cannot learn swimming by reading a book. It has to be inside a pool.
Correct.
And it has to be by someone who knows how to swim.
Correct.
Right? Who just hasn't read a book on swimming and has done some research on swimming. He cannot teach you how to swim.
Correct.
So in that sense, business is more training than it is theory, right? And so that's why we were convinced that we should be in a building where there are as many good, well-governed companies, right? So there are students are in that ecosystem where there is almost this osmosis that's happening.
Yeah.
So like, I remember we were taking the round, we had that coffee shop, right? That large food court. And in that food court, 20%, 30% are my students. The rest are all these professionals.
Correct.
And that osmosis that happens, like that's more I can do for a kid's education than any class ever can.
Correct.
So that's why we decided to pay 220 rupees per square feet.
So it's a courageous call, right?
Yeah, it's expensive. But at the end of the day, it's actually not, it's less courageous, I would say. You know why? Because if I were to build my own campus, that would have cost me 500 crores easy.
Land and build, and that's it. That's where you exhaust the money, right?
Yeah, and you exhaust your money. So here, I pay rent, which is maybe 5-6% of my total fees. Not that much, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Right. My maintenance cost is very, very low. Right. And the capex that has gone into the campus, that's again just 40,000 square feet. That's nothing.
So interesting.
So that's why, and I can teach as many students here that maybe let's say an IIM teaches in hundreds of acres.
Yeah. You were telling me that the utilization of a IIM classroom is like abysmally.
It's less than 20%. Less than 20%. They're empty most of the time.
Yeah, I remember IIM, like, any classroom would mostly be empty.
And people like use it for like, their own studies.
Yeah.
Like, अकेले बैठ के मैं classroom में बैठ के पढ़ लूँगा.
Correct.
I mean, that's expensive real estate.
Absolutely. But because it's far away, that it's kind of absorbed. But in your case, because it's close by, you're saying, okay, this is now I need
You have to utilize it. Yeah. And in fact, a lot of corporates have started doing their like corporate trainings at our campus.
Oh, and you charge money for it.
And we charge money for it. That actually becomes a revenue stream for us.
Oh, wow.
A lot of corporates come to our campus to get executive education. Right? So it works out beautifully. So even in the evenings, 6 to 9 p.m., most of the classes are full. Because if it's not the students, it's the corporates who are coming and doing their thing.
And then again, the osmosis goes from the cafeteria and the location to in the school itself.
I'll give you another example. So, Entrepreneurs Organization, this EO.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of EO events in Gurgaon happen on our campus. So that's 100 promoters who are coming to campus almost every other week, engaging with students just serendipitously, like not even by design.
Correct.
And imagine like the good it does to the students.
Agree.
I mean, your office is 5 minutes away from the campus.
Correct.
It is so easy for you to just come.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I completely agree with you, right? I think in retrospect, all good decisions seem smart, but to do it, because has this been done by anyone before?
In the US, a lot of campuses are actually like this.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, a lot of campuses. In fact, if you think about NYU also, Stern School of Business, in the middle of the city. I mean, NYU was already in the middle of the city, but Stern is actually a few floors in a building.
Oh, wow. But is it like in the middle of the industrial?
Yeah, it's like by Washington Square Park.
Oh, wow.
Right, it's like 10 minutes from Financial District, which is where the
Wall Street and
World Trade Center, etc. all is, and then 10 minutes from the Midtown area where you have the Times Square.
Wow.
So it's incredibly easy for anyone to just come, and a lot of people go to Stern over, let's say, a Wharton, or even over, let's say, a Booth or Haas, because Stern is in New York.
That is interesting. And on
the tutelage.
Practitioners, yeah?
Yeah, so, again, as I said, it's very hard for someone who's not run business before to teach business authoritatively, right? And students are also very smart these days, right? If you teach them something, right, let's say about marketing, they probably know a little bit more about you, how marketing works today.
Correct.
Right? So if, for example, a professor who's teaching marketing comes from an academic background, has never run a campaign himself before,
Yeah.
students will take that professor for a ride. They will not respect him. Today's students will not. Maybe yesteryear students, like my parents' generation, they probably accepted whatever the professor told them. Today, the students question, right?
Yeah.
And that's why you need a Manoj Kohli to come and teach marketing, taking examples from his real-time data at Airtel.
Correct.
Right? You can't have a professor only alone teaching. And so when we reach out to people like Manoj Kohli, or people like Karan, or people like Tanmay, or people like yourself, and we request, can you give us some time on your calendar, every weekend or every week, 1 or 2 hours, come interact with students in a structured fashion, people don't say no. Because I ask them, it's 5 minutes away.
Yeah.
इतना तो आप time दे सकते हो जी.
Correct.
ठीक है, तो कोई मना नहीं करता. unless किसी का IPO impending हो 6 महीने में,
That is true.
कोई मना नहीं करता. So, and it's worked out really well for us because that also another version of asset light.
Yes. Because you're basically now bringing in practitioners on their time, but making it super flexible both in terms of time as well as location. They don't have to like fly to Ahmedabad or fly to Lucknow for this. They just have to drive to your...
And some of them just have to take an elevator down.
That is so true.
Right. So in the same building that we are, we have, I think, BCG's, Bank of America, Expedia, EY, Beckett.
Yeah.
So it's very easy for those folks to just press the button, come down, teach, then go back up. They come like in the lunch break में आ गए या घर जाते समय आ गए. So,
but how did you think of like Karan Johar teaching a 20-hour course on movie economics? Like for me, that was a seriously fascinating thing. I would have loved to have learned something like that at IIM Lucknow. It just did. And if think about like I take myself back 14 years. I feel old now. I was not able to enjoy the in-classroom experience because I just felt the professors did not have their finger on the pulse of business practically. I think they were great guys, fabulous academicians. Our professor of strategy, who is now the director of IIM Lucknow, Professor Archana Shukla, was a very good teacher with great intent. But I don't think in classroom teaching from an academic who's on a PhD in business is the way to learn business. So all the courses just kind of fell flat for me personally. May not have been for others. And my learning happened at McKinsey. I suddenly realized what business was. I was like, what was I doing for 2 years? This is real coaching. And you're right. Apprenticeship is the way for it to happen. But for you to think about, to take that further and say, hey, I'm going to come up with 8 semesters of 6 weeks each. Each semester, people are going to create their own companies. By the way, they're going to be taught by someone from NASA or Karan Johar. How does that happen? Like, is that a playbook that you thought about? Is his expertise? Where does this come from?
So 2 things. First about Karan. See, Karan is, I think he's great at what he does, right? And we wanted to bring in a perspective from an entrepreneur who's not from a traditional business setting. You know, there are enough FMCG players, there are enough FMCG founders, there are enough manufacturing founders, there are enough telecom founders, bankers who come to campus consultants. But for students to learn business from someone from, let's say, a cricketing background.
Correct.
Something we're going to announce very soon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, very excited for that. And someone from a Bollywood background, that does 2 things. That, first of all, brings students' excitement levels up. See, in business schools, our job is not to just, give syllabus to students, not to just give input in, finance or marketing. It's also to light their curiosity. It's also to make them think beyond the boxes that they have been confined to, So when Karan comes to class and they learn about the Bollywood economics, they learn about how each movie's P&L is structured, now suddenly they realize the importance of, what they learned in finance, what they learned in marketing, how that can be applied to Bollywood. I think the conversation there just becomes a lot more exciting. Second thing is, it works amazingly well as content marketing for us as a brand. We are new and we are competing with established brands, legacy institutions, ISB and IIM, right? So for us to really stand out, we have to create good content. And Karan teaching a course makes for beautiful content. It brings us in the limelight.
Correct. I saw some of the videos on YouTube where he breaks down like his assumptions on movie economics. This is what it's going to cost. This is what ticket sales are going to be. This is what OTT sales are going to be. Here's broadly what my worst case scenario. He is so sharp. And he was able to break it down. Very few businessmen can break down their business in a 90-second reel.
Correct. And he did a phenomenal job of that. And so students get very excited, obviously, with these things. Their attendance, like, obviously, he's 100%. That works out really well. But the other thing is that it makes for great content marketing for us. Now, to answer your second question, which is about this course structure, right? This was actually through a process of optimization. So in the very first year, we did not have this structure. In the very first year, we had this one thing where practitioners were going to come and teach. That was something that was part of our design moving, when we started. But at that time, we didn't have this start a business in each term thing.
Okay.
We just had this one business plan competition that everybody has.
Correct.
No differentiation there. Every business school in the world has a business plan competition. But what we realized was that at the end of the first year, people had learned more from the business plan competition than from any of the classes, right? Number one. Number two, what we saw was that a lot of the classes, what they were learning in classes, they were actually applying to their business plan. And that's when those lessons actually solidified in their mind.
Correct.
Right? So you learned a consumer behavior concept, right? And you'll forget about it after the exam.
Correct.
But if you've applied it in your business,
it sticks
with you. So that is a beautiful revelation that we had. So now we are in our third year. And over time, we have now come up with this playbook whereby in each term, and each term is 6 weeks long, you have to do a 0 to 1 sprint.
Okay.
Right? And you have to build a small business. So in term 1, every student has to build a dropshipping business. And whatever...
So you've decided the industry.
Decided the industry. And I'll tell you why we've decided certain industries. Dropshipping is an amazing concept because it teaches you guerrilla marketing.
Yeah.
It teaches you basic supply chain. It teaches you basic website design, distribution, Instagram, connecting all of it together, Shopify, all of that works. And most importantly, you will make money. It's very difficult not to make money in dropshipping.
Correct.
Right? So in the very first term, when students who have never built a business see real-time revenue coming into their bank accounts and them making profit, they get this confidence that I can do it. The first thing we have to do to students is build their confidence. Rest, everything will follow. So in term 1, we build their confidence by showcasing to them, see, listen, in just 6 weeks, you made 1 lakh rupees in revenue. Could you have ever imagined in your life
making 1 lakh? Yeah.
Right? And now suddenly the bottle is open, like the box is open.
You have tasted blood now.
You've tasted blood. And once you taste entrepreneurial blood or entrepreneurship, it's very difficult to come back from it.
Correct. That's what they call it the itch, no? And it doesn't go away.
So first term with dropshipping, our only objective is to create that itch.
Interesting. Chaska.
And it's very easy to start a dropshipping business. It takes 1 week to set everything up. It takes 2 weeks to figure out your GTM. 3rd to 4th week में आपका revenue आना शुरू हो जाता है. And 5th to 6th week में आप उसको optimize कर सकते हो. You can start thinking about PMF. You start speaking that language. It's beautiful.
I saw some of the products that came out of your graduating batch now.
Correct.
Fascinating stuff.
In term 2, we try something else. So in term 2, everybody has to build a YouTube business. That means content. They have to create YouTube content or Instagram content or whatever, right? And most people would say that I'm camera shy. This is not me. Like, this is not my persona. But this is the marketing of today.
Yeah. Completely agree with you.
I mean, right?
Completely.
Yeah.
You won't believe, Pratham, I'm now 36 years old.
Yeah.
It's taken me 13 years after business school to finally realize that consumers of today actually want to associate with brands beyond the brand communication. They won't fall for a simple ad of the brand ambassador. They want to know the person behind the brand. They are attached to the content. BarberShop was born fundamentally because we felt we had an opportunity to tell the Bombay Shaving Company story through a lens of entrepreneurship, which is personal.
Yeah.
It was a very, very now counterintuitive move, but one that has worked for us. If we all had that second term at Masters Union, it would have been probably a very natural thought process to say, this is what we need to do to make the business more successful. And it's the need of the hour. Like, you can't be shy about this anymore.
Yeah. And I think another thing is that, and you'll probably know this better, and I'd love to hear from you. Do you think that in India, customers like to associate themselves less with the brand and more with the person behind the brand?
More.
Is that growing now?
More now, for sure. People come to the Instagram page, they want to know who the founder is, they want to know
what the story is.
People associate with, like the Tesla Elon story is very clear, right?
Yeah.
People associate with Tesla because of Elon. And they identify as being a part of his pack.
Yeah.
In a way, right?
Steve
Jobs. People, when they use an iPhone, for them it is...
They're connected to his soul.
They're part of his tribe. Happening a lot in India. You're seeing it happen on LinkedIn, for example, where people are CEOs and founders are getting hundreds and thousands of followers, millions of followers, people who will blindly follow them. And it is almost a definitive assumption that they're using the products she or he is making.
Yeah.
So
founders are the new superstars, huh?
Yeah, I genuinely, and so I don't think it will create 1,000 crore business.
Yeah.
But it will create a 25 crore wave, which can become a 1,000 crore business.
Yeah.
So that initial early adopters or super like cultish loyalty comes from.
Yeah.
So For example, so many founders now in India, Kunal at Cred has built like a personality which people are attracted to. So they use his product for him. They watch his ads for him. They share his stuff for him. Aman at Boat.
Absolutely,
People put on Boat headphones because they want to be known as Aman's friend. Not because the sound is great. It must be. But I'm sure there are 5 other companies doing that. But because Aman is the face, they like his dialogues on Shark Tank. They like what he posts on LinkedIn. They like that he's a relatable guy. They like his sense of clothes. They like...
What is it like for you? Have you seen similar effects in Bombay Shaving Company?
It is hard because, to be honest, our product is a very personal product. It is inside the bathroom. So it's hard for me to measure if this is led to someone identifying, but it's definitely led to a lot of top of mind. So our top of mind for our business has gone from 1.2% in June of 2022 to almost 7% now. In like 9
What does that mean, top of mind?
If you ask, so we did this with 250 Gillette Mark III users in urban India, Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore.
Okay.
And we tell them, tell us the first brand that comes to mind when we say shaving foam.
Shaving foam.
Bombay Shaving Company.
Interesting.
7% said Bombay Shaving Company first.
Wow.
Only 1% said it first long back. So there's Tom, Spont, and top of mind, Spont and loyal purchasers.
Got it.
Right? Tom and Spont are critical. So we're like, cool, we're now top of mind for 7%.
Very cool. And the only thing that changed was BarberShop.
My marketing head obviously kind of beheads me for this.
Okay.
But I would like to believe
BarberShop is
that. No, I don't think it's the only thing, but it has played a big role.
Big role. Sure.
Every time I take a flight at an airport,
someone would come up.
There are 4 to 5 people who come and take selfies.
Yeah.
There are probably 25 people who have recognized. 5 whom have felt it's important enough.
50 have probably recognized.
Yeah.
And 5 would have the courage to come and do it.
5 people, man, on Delhi Chandigarh flight, not Delhi Bombay.
Yeah.
Delhi Chandigarh. So, if your face is becoming known, and I talk about Bombay Shaving Company, like my CEO will kick my ass if I don't talk about BSE 20 times an episode.
Sure.
So these are all my perspectives, right? They come from this company. But it's absolutely getting into people's minds. It's not the objective only, but it's a lovely side of it. So you're right. I think your Term 2 project is absolutely spot on, and people are able to build their own content engines. It's fascinating.
It does 2 things, for us, the data that we have. First is that, of course, students get a proof of work project. When they're applying for jobs tomorrow, they can just send that URL, that LinkedIn URL or Instagram URL or YouTube page, that this is my work.
Correct.
Right? Would you want to give me a marketing job? It's very hard to say no to it.
Yeah.
Think about it, right?
Yeah.
That's number 1. And number 2, again, it gives them that confidence that I can face the camera. That I'm comfortable in my body, right? That I'm comfortable with my accent. So a lot of our students who come from the southern states, they actually have a huge complex that their accent is pulling them back in life.
Are you serious?
Yes, absolutely, big time. Because see, the tech industry, even though it's more based in Bangalore, if you look at the senior management, it's more Hindi, it's more sort of Bombay, Delhi, North India, for whatever reason, right? And even if it's from, even if they're from South India, their accent is probably a little bit more mature. So these kids who come to us with heavy accents, they get comfortable in their skin when they're in front of the YouTube camera, and they're getting likes and they're getting comments, and someone is saying, hey, listen, what you're saying is totally right. That's such amazing validation.
Wow.
It elevates them. It elevates them.
No, that's amazing. And so then you do dropship, you do, a content. And it's okay, YouTube, Instagram.
Yeah, YouTube, Instagram, Medium. Yeah, some people are like, मेरे को नहीं करना. कैमरा पे बिल्कुल नहीं आना. तो ठीक है, तो Medium पे कर, तो LinkedIn पे कर, तो Twitter पे कर. That's also okay. Put yourself out there.
As you.
And as one of our students is a CA. It's a very interesting story. He's a CA. And obviously you would think that he would create some finance content, personal finance stuff. He did not. He created this thing called the Kumra's Planet.
Okay.
Like Animal Planet.
Okay.
And he actually talks about like weird aspects of animals on Instagram.
Okay.
And he's growing. He talks about how pufferfish actually uses, some herb that it finds in the ocean to get high. That's his like most popular post.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, some like random ass comments like this, these facts or these factoids, and he'll just create that content. And if you meet him, he's a CA, so you can already place like what his personality must be like. Very changed man after Kumra's planet.
Is his name Kumra?
Yeah, Sahil Kumra.
That is so cool. By the way, so I was not on Instagram till the barbershop. I've joined now, and I just realized it's an amazing world. I've kind of gotten in touch with my friends and people I've lost touch with. But the fascinating thing is, I love following knowledge. Knowledge. Like there's a channel, there's a handle called "Did You Know Something?" I'll share
10
it.
years old, 10 years.
मेरे को याद नहीं यार क्या है. I like, but very fascinating. Like he is able to put together videos and like fact. I've gone through all of the stuff that he's put out there. Amazing. And tell me a little bit about these practitioners. So one is you have now a campus in the heart of the city, where there's osmosis of business, understanding, industry, and students not only outside campus or in the building but also inside your facilities. You have courses designed like movie economics or building or startups that you're where access to. Now, who are these practitioners? Give me. We have spoken about Karan at length, but and Manoj, but who else are the people who?
Sure. So they are usually of two types. First is former CEOs or former CXOs.
Okay.
Right. So these are people who are probably in their mid 50s, early 60s, where they have sort of, achieved whatever they wanted to achieve in life, and now they really want to give back. Right. So these are people who take time out, even during weekdays, from their chairmanship or from their, CEO emeritusship or whatever, and then they come to campus and spend good time with students.
Okay.
Right. So that's the one. That's Manoj Kohli.
Correct.
Right. Then we have people who are probably...
Give me a few examples of these.
So Naveen Munjal is the other example. Naveen Munjal runs Hero Electric.
Correct.
Right. So he's probably mid 50s, early 50s, and he's a very busy CEO.
Correct.
He's actually a very busy CEO.
I mean, given the space and given all these things.
Yeah, and he's growing like, I think, month over month, some 20%, and year over year, doubling, I don't know, some crazy metrics there. But he wants to give back. So he would come to campus, teach the full course. We have some VCs. We have Anshu. I don't know if you work with Anshu at Whiteboard.
Prashar.
Anshu Prashar.
Yeah, of course. So I am Lucknow.
Yeah, he's also, correct. So he comes and teaches the VC course.
Wow.
Right. So you have these people who have sort of, done something in life. Now they want to give back. That's one category. The second category is people who are in the middle management who want a new source of income. So I'll tell you a few more very interesting masters. One is Rajat Mathur. He's the MD of Morgan Stanley.
Okay. In India. Okay.
And he comes and teaches the entire course on how Morgan Stanley manages its people and how that has stood out against, let's say, Goldman, etc. globally. So him coming in automatically makes sure that the students are like, wow, right? They're like, okay, the Morgan Stanley ka MD baitha hamare samne, we better be like present, we better be, awake, all of those things, take care of themselves.
That's actually such an important point, that if there is someone who is that senior and knows their shit, students are always on their toes.
Yep. Because they're inspired, na? In that moment, they're inspired.
They want to impress.
They want to impress him. Yeah, that's the word. Yeah. We have a former country manager of Amazon coming and teaching supply chain.
Wow.
Right. And he's very open. Like the thing is, even though he comes with authority, he's open to student ideas. So he'll always ask them, okay, what can we do differently? If you had to design Amazon from scratch again, how would you do it? All of that stuff. And he tells them, hey, listen, reality mein aisa nahi hota hai. And a lot of things that we learn in school or in college, they make sense on paper.
Yeah.
Like 2 + 2 4 ho jata hai, but reality mein bilkul bhi nahi hota hai. So these people give that reality check also to the students. इन्होंने presentation में ये तो लिख दिया, पर भाई लाइफ में ऐसा नहीं होता एक्चुअली. पहले बता दूं मैं तेरे को, ये जो तुमने CAC कैलकुलेट करी है ना, CAC minus CAC over LTV is equal to positive.
हाँ.
ऐसा होता नहीं है reality में. Right. So I think those reality checks that they give really benefit students. I think that's where true education starts. And then we also have a lot of people in mid-management who do this for extra income.
Correct.
Right. So they get...
It's good for them, right?
It's great for them. And we, of course, have our standards, right? So we interview them, we talk to them, we make sure that, they actually can add value, that they have the data sets, that they have the stories. And there's a huge process that is used to actually create the curriculum. So we have one of our full-time faculty members who's a curriculum expert sitting down with one of these practitioners, senior or junior, and making sure that we have 30-minute by 30-minute, blocks of content that not only is relevant to the industry, but also has some outcomes. Like at the end of 30 minutes, what did the student learn actually that he can apply or she can apply in the business that they're doing in that term?
Wow.
Right. All the exams, all the tests, all the assessments are all related to how you apply those concepts in your business. Not on some let A be equal to 3 and X be equal to Y and then do the calculation. No, those A, B, X, Y's are going to be real metrics from your business that you're running. So the curriculum talks to these outclass kind of challenges, these businesses that you're building. And all the teachers are trained to make sure that they're leveraging the outclass component to inform their curriculum. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I wanted to come and kind of talk to you about, I think, if I look at world-class institutions that have been built of education, right? The ability to attract great students is probably the most important ability.
It's everything, yeah.
Right? And that ability is probably proxied by the success of alumni, right? You go to a place because you want to emulate people who have come from that place in a way. You want the same opportunities that have come to classes before. You want the same jobs. You want the same faculty. So, in a way, how do you get the best students to come to your college is probably the most difficult question that education entrepreneurs who are building institutions, not at tech and so on, but who are building institutions, are probably struggling with.
Absolutely.
You're inducting your third batch now.
Fourth
Batch for business school and first batch for undergrad.
Undergrad, correct.
But it was fascinating for me to hear about how you used the COVID situation to get in an incredible inaugural batch for you. So just talk a little bit about that.
So I think the biggest mistake institutions made is they start big. Right? So we started with 60 students only. And to get good 60 students, it's hard, but it's not impossible. Right? And why it worked for us during COVID was that at that time, these good 60 students were actually on their way to other business schools globally, and even some in India. But because of COVID, all those classes were going to be held online. Right? And nobody wants to do an MBA program online. So most of these students were thinking about deferring their admission anyways.
Correct.
Right? And most colleges allowed it at that time, if you remember.
Correct.
So when
even now, if you get a Harvard admit, it's easy to defer.
You can defer it. But that time, 30% of the batch used to defer.
Correct.
This time, maybe 2% people defer, for other reasons.
Correct.
So what happened was that those 60 kids that we were able to reach out to, and the way we reached out to them was just we figured out who are the people who have good GMAT scores, because you can get that list from the GMAT body.
Correct.
And then we just called them up and said, hey, listen, we're building Masters Union and we'd love for you to be part of the first batch. Would you apply? And so our total database at that time was 44,000 people. Right. And out of those 44,000 people who had more than 650 in GMAT was some 5,000-6,000.
Okay.
So we reached out to them, called them. We got our masters to call them. Like I remember Rajat Mathurji actually helped us by calling some of the students and saying, listen, I'm going to be teaching. Would you like to be part of this cohort? Like we did all of that. And we had some 600 kids out of those 5,000 kids who actually ended up submitting the application. Okay.
Amazing.
Out of those 600, I think we gave offers to 80 or 90. And then when the time came for them to accept our offer, then they were evaluating what do we do.
Correct.
Right? Either I can, wait 1 year, defer, go to Northwestern or go to INSEAD or go to Imperial or HEC Paris, or I can give this business school a shot. And so in the first year, we
were 2021, 2022, where wave 2 and all of that, right? So
wave 1.
Wave 2, 2021 was wave 2. 2020 was wave 1.
So we started 2020.
2021 was graduating batch was. Okay.
Correct. So wave 1. And that's when nobody knew what's going to happen, right? So people weren't even open to traveling. So that really worked in our favor, where 60 kids actually agreed to give Masters Union a shot over the other colleges that they'd gotten into.
Correct.
Right? And so they came to us for 1 year thinking that इस साल में यदि हमें अच्छा आउटकम मिल जाता है, so then well and good. और नहीं मिलता तो अगले साल की deferral तो है ही हमारे पास.
So plan B was great.
Plan B was already there for them.
And plan A, you made it even more, like you made the cherry on the top by not charging.
By not charging much. I mean, we only charge them some security deposit so that they don't run away. We only charge them like a minimal admission fees or something So our net fee that students paid at that time was like 20% or 15%, not even. And so obviously in the first year we made a loss.
Correct.
But that was okay because that was our investment by getting good students. Yeah.
And talk about that batch.
That batch, I mean, they'll always have a special place in my heart. So those people were obviously early adopter mindset.
Correct.
Right. So they were almost more entrepreneurial than the average student. They
took a bet with you.
Sorry?
They took a bet with you.
They took a bet with me. And I think me and the masters, we were sort of like in the front line. We didn't have like admission counselors. We didn't have like a salespeople.
Correct.
Right. We had ourselves talking to students and saying, listen, this is what we are trying to do. This is the class structure. This is the curriculum for each of the courses. Are you interested? And by the way, that curriculum was really good. Even though it wasn't what it is today.
Correct.
It was still quite better than the alternatives.
Correct.
And the students were like, yeah, this makes sense. And I'm getting it so cheap. And so at the end of the day, if I get a good placement, if I have good companies coming to campus, well and good, right? In India, a big proxy for brand is also the placement.
Correct. No,
Right.
it is the proxy in my view.
Yeah. So even though we didn't have any alums and no alumni network, we had two things going for us. One, we had a great master network. Sure, we didn't have students who were working in VCG, but we had someone from VCG teaching, na?
Correct.
So you would get that access.
Correct.
We didn't have anyone in Microsoft as our alumni working. We didn't have the Satya Nadellas of the world, but we had someone from Microsoft actually teaching.
Correct.
So in that sense, we had that access to corporates,
Correct.
which students need and deserve. So what we had to just do was convince them of this and make sure that these companies from where the masters are coming actually come and recruit as well.
Oh, that's a big leap to take, right?
Yeah. So we, in the very first year, focused maybe 60% of our energies as a team on placements, on making sure that these 60 students get the best placements that they can possibly get, right? And students would get a placement, let's say of 20 lakhs, we'd say, छोड़ दे. फिर से try करते हैं, शायद 25 का हो जाए, शायद 22 का हो जाए, शायद 30 का हो जाए, छोड़ दे, कोई बात नहीं. Right? So we actually, we made some, we burned some bridges there with some companies, but that's okay because we really wanted to get the best outcomes for the students. And in that process, we didn't even realize that our average salary of our first batch crossed that of IIM Ahmedabad and ISB. Because we were so focused on those 60 students. Imagine if all these masters put their energies together, can't they place 60 students at like the best of their abilities?
And there are 60 students who had, most of whom had deferred admits to INSEAD and...
INSEAD was at one maybe from INSEAD, not everyone was INSEAD.
Okay, but
yeah, tier 1.5 colleges. No, I wouldn't say tier 1. Like there was no Wharton or Harvard or Chicago or Haas, but there was one INSEAD, I remember.
Wow. And what was that salary bracket for the first?
So at that time, our average salary was around 28.2 lakhs. Right?
That's sizable.
Yeah, and that like just beat ISB and IIM Ahmedabad. And we realized 1 month before we were actually about to release our placement report that this is happening. And so then in the last 1 month, we put even more effort to make sure that that actually happens. And we knew that, if we release this placement report, people will question it. This is impossible. That how is this, like, this is a fraud or this is a scheme or this is something. And so we got the report audited by the same organization that audits IIM Ahmedabad's report.
Wow.
So that people trust. And once that placement report got released, then the brand flywheel started running.
Correct. The first batch is everything.
Everything. The first batch is everything. So the first batch, we took a loss. We took a very small number of kids and we worked really hard on them. The flywheel started running. And now we get good students because we have good placements and we have good masters. Right? And now because we have good placements and we have good students, we get good full-time faculty also that's ready to come, leave their like jobs in, let's say, Wharton or Harvard also, move to India and teach.
Give me a sense of the economics of an education business in business. Like our viewers, Pratham, are people who want to be entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah.
So they love to get inside the mind of an entrepreneur, think like her or him, and evaluate what they want to do in the future, possibly.
Yeah.
So
sounds good. So let's do this. So let's say the fees is 100 rupees.
Correct.
Right. Now, out of 100 rupees, only 25 is direct cost.
Okay. What does that mean?
I mean, above gross margin, right?
Okay.
So that's going to be the cost of the teachers and the professors who are teaching you.
Okay.
Because that's the product that you're getting.
Correct.
So basically, most education businesses work at a 75% gross margin. So 100 rupees you earn, 100 rupees revenue you collect, 25 goes into teaching.
Okay. So now it includes your practitioner cost.
Practitioner cost, faculty cost.
Does it include your the rental for your?
No.
Okay, no.
No. So 25 is a direct cost, like COGS equivalent.
Correct.
That's a COGS equivalent.
Product, okay.
COGS, right? And thereafter, your CAC, your marketing costs in education business is actually very, very, very low.
Because of word of mouth. And
Because of word of mouth, because, I mean, in fact, in our case, we have negative CAC. Because students actually pay to apply. They have to pay an application fees to apply, right? Which is almost, 4,000-5,000 rupees per student. So if you're getting 2,000 applications, your CAC gets covered.
And then some.
And then some. So CAC is actually negative.
Correct.
And that's where this business becomes a very good business.
What sits below the gross margin?
That's where the rent comes.
Okay.
The cost of the rest of the team, the placements team and the content team,
So
and
salaries and rent.
Salaries and rent. And that's about it. Right? And so the rest of the money that remains can go into giving students grants for their startups, can go into giving them seed money to set up their YouTube stations and set up their stalls for drop shipping,
Infra and all
of that. It can go into real education. So a lot of the money we give back to students because that helps us again build the brand. So for example, in the last 4 terms, students have to build one business in a sustained long-term way, proper real business, right? We call it the venture initiation program. Divided into 4 parts, starts with MVP creation, then GTM, then PMF, and then finally the seed round, which is day after, and you're coming for it.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So you have 10 companies presenting to 40 VCs. Right? It's a full Y Combinator like demo day that's happening. So we'll be, doing that. But sorry, what were we talking about before this?
The economics of...
The economics, yeah. So we actually give a lot of the money back to students through grants so that they can run these businesses.
Yeah, that's so...
That works out really well. That also is probably 10 to 15% of whatever we earn goes back to students. Right? And then of course, because we are new, there are a lot of inefficiencies in the business.
Okay.
So currently we just break even.
So that 75% is kind of going into...
Is going to salary. So for example, my placement team is a large team. They work with students on their decks, on their portfolios, on their CVs, on their interviews. I have maybe a 15-20% very professional sales team that's going out to corporates and selling my students product by product. Literally, we have a booklet which has
I've seen
all
that.
the CVs. Yeah,
I've seen that, yes.
So we actually show the CVs to the corporates there कि सर आपके लिए ये वाला बच्चा अच्छा रहेगा, नहीं ये वाला बच्चा अच्छा रहेगा, मैडम ये देखो ये बच्चा ऐसा है. So we actually are doing a proper sale process of our students. And that, I mean, just that team's cost is probably around 25%. But that's not...
Do other institutes
No, nobody does that. Generally, most business schools have a PlaceCom.
PlaceCom, yeah.
Right, and PlaceCom has no cost.
Yeah, it's basically...
But other B schools have crazy high estate management cost.
Yeah.
In some of these IIMs, they spend over like 5-6 crores on just horticulture.
That's crazy.
Remember, like imagine
Lucknow is a
beautiful campus. And that costs a lot of money. That's not going into education. That's going into making things look pretty.
Yeah, which is creating an environment where people, but you're
which
right.
Which is important, but like they could have done with like cheaper trees. I mean, some trees are very expensive to manage and maintain. They just are,
That's fascinating. And how do you see this build out? Your incoming batch is now 240 kids?
Yeah, so that's the economics. You get the economics.
Yeah.
25% COGS, 75% gross margin, and the rest 75% is split between 25% goes into placements, 25% goes into rent, building, student experiences, hostel, all of that, and then 20% rest of the salaries for the admin team, admissions team,
At some point, that placements thing, you want to give it back to the students in a way, the way ISB probably does?
So once the flywheel starts running, you don't need the placements team as much. You don't need a big placements team. And also, placements team will not increase in size now.
Yeah.
The number of students will increase in size, so placement as 25% will become probably 5%.
Yeah, will spread
It'll become 5% stable state. However, I'll keep the sales team still because I want to keep selling my students more and more and more, right? So today, if I've closed Microsoft and Google and Facebook, tomorrow I want to close Tesla.
Correct. And like opportunities outside India and so on.
And HR heads like receive us with open arms because no one else has ever sold to them. So we go and say, listen, this is the student like तुमने मेरी life आसान कर दिया, मैं तो 20% agency को देता.
Alternately, they will have to fight for day 0, day 0.5, this, that, and IIMs and so on.
Yeah. So forget about those recruiters. Those are the first line that we go to. But even recruiters, nobody's ever approached. Nobody's ever approached Tesla to come recruit from Indian B schools. Why not? Right? Like no one has ever approached Salesforce US or no one's ever approached Google ka Dublin office to recruit kids from India. So we do all of that.
Especially if you go to them and say, hey, look at our YouTube content creators who's gotten 1 million subscribers.
The work will speak for itself. And they don't care whether you're an IIM student or not. The work speaks for itself. So we'll always have a placements team. We'll probably currently 25% cost. Maybe we'll steady state at 5-10%. I don't know. Let's see. But let's go back to the ranking.
Yeah.
Ranking 50% is on salaries, right?
If you're able to get someone in dollars.
Yeah.
You've taken someone at 6 lakhs per year here.
Look at the ROI on that.
Give them a $150,000 job.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that's why it works. Those are the economics. But I'll tell you, most colleges, let's say a VIT or an SRM or a Manipal or a BITS Pilani or a KIIT, Kalinga Institute of Technology in Bhubaneswar.
Sharda also is in this.
Sharda also, yeah. They're all running at 50 to 70% EBITDA margins.
That is crazy.
Yeah, you can Google any of them. Just Google Manipal, space, CRISIL, credit rating. Because those are all public documents. You'll find in the first 2 or 3 results, look at their numbers. They make for amazing cash flow machines.
That's unbelievable. Where do you see this? If you were to imagine the Masters Junior in 5 years when you're in the top 10, paint a picture in terms of where the campus will be, how big will it be, what kind of students, how many students.
Yeah.
Have you do you have a vision for what you want to be when you're a top 10 business school?
So let's look at the existing top 10 institutions. Let's look at HBS.
Correct.
Guess what's HBS's revenue?
2 to 4 billion? 2 to 5 billion?
Yeah, it's 1.4 million. Close. They'll get to 2 very soon, I'm sure. Now guess what is the revenue of their MBA program?
Much like small percent, 10%, 20% of that.
Yeah, 10% of that, 10-15% of that. It's approximately 200 million. It's less than that.
Correct.
But what is Harvard known for?
The MBA.
The MBA program. So, the business school economics work in such a way that your flagship program is where the brand is anchored.
But the revenue may not be anchored.
But the revenue may not be. The revenue is anchored in executive education programs, in online education programs, in undergrad programs.
Oh, is it?
In all these other, HBS doesn't have an undergrad program, but for other institutions like Ross or Huss or Sloan, MIT, the undergrad business really feeds into the revenue. Right? And so what Masters Union would look like in 5 years, I'd tell you, it would look a lot like one of these institutions, where our MBA program, where the brand rests, is a baby that we caress and we care for, and we never increase its size, we never dilute its quality.
What the size is now?
We are at 240 now. Yeah, we'll be 240 this year.
Okay.
Right? I don't think we'll ever go beyond 300 or 400. Never. We're just making it harder for ourselves to get a better ranking.
Correct.
Right? But then through these executive education programs, because we'll have a brand, we'll be able to go to companies and say, hey, listen, this is going to add value to your company, to your employees, to your HR, to your teams. And that's where we'll actually make the revenue. We go to, people who want to do executive MBAs and we say, listen, that's where the monetization actually happens. And that's where you earn. So the MBA program actually, even though it's run at a profit, not at a very high profit. The executive education programs, which then the money that you earn there, you can leverage into growing, you can leverage into, doing so much more. Yeah.
Will it be a multi-campus?
I don't think so. HBS, all the top 10 institutions
A single campus.
have one single main campus. They might have satellite centers where students can travel to in case they are going to Shanghai, let's say. Let's say HBS, I think, has a center in Shanghai. But if students are traveling for some case study or for some work, they can just, use that as a space, but they'll never take admission in that campus, new students. I think Masters Union will be this campus only. We'll maybe add 1 or 2 more floors here. We'll probably be at 500 MBA students, probably at 4,000 undergrad students, and many, many, executive education students. And the thing is that, sometimes people ask me this question, do you feel bad that you're making money from education? Right. I don't think we'll ever make money from education. I think we'll make money from B2B services.
Say more.
So most of the profit or most of the revenue would come from these executive education programs where you're providing a service to companies who are using that service to earn more money.
Correct. And you're coaching their staff on certain skills.
On certain skills, right? So that's almost like corporate education. That's almost a service. You're a service provider. You're not an educator for a second. Just making that, differentiation. So I don't feel bad about that. I may feel bad about my MBA program making a huge profit. right? But the MBA program is what creates the brand, and then you can leverage that brand to build a B2B services business, which is what Harvard Business School has done.
Correct.
Right? Their MBA program, they basically run at
break even. I guess.
Yeah, at a break even basically.
But everyone who's going there, people are spending.
Yeah,
It's exorbitant, right?
They earn $1 billion in executive education
In 1 year.
in 1 year.
It's 100 million a month.
Right. And I don't think they have a very strong sales team. Like it's
don't
not
need it.
it's not like the sales team of, let's say, Salesforce.
Yeah.
It's not like the sales team of, let's say, like
Microsoft.
It's not. Imagine if it was.
Yeah.
Imagine if HBS had like an executive education center in every country. It will always be full. I think that 1 billion can be 5 billion.
I remember when McKinsey used to elect partners, there's something called a new partner orientation, which is a 1 week long program, which is residential in Harvard. So all the dorms, and I don't know how much McKinsey pays for it, but I'm fairly certain it's a bomb.
Probably not.
But that's the investment the firm makes in Harvard Business School. And a part of that 1 billion probably comes from McKinsey in a big way.
Yeah.
But I can imagine that being like such a seal of status and prestige, right? And they're going to Harvard for X, Y, Z.
Exactly. That's what we aspire to be. I think that's what master's student would look like in 5 to 10 years. But I think there'll be one difference though. I think these are legacy institutions and they do some things great, right? But I think we will change with the world,
Okay.
right? I think there is a huge need for courses to be updated. Like for example, this year, marketing will change due to the AI movement, right? I mean, a lot of things are going to change in marketing. A lot of things are going to change in process development and systems. A lot of things are going to change in finance, right? So we have to make sure that we update ourselves, our curriculum every year, depending on what's happening in that year. Legacy institutions don't do that. They somehow become prisoners of their own legacy. Their professors become too comfortable in the way that they have been teaching.
Yeah.
And they don't update as much. Maybe in HBS they do. I don't want to say no, but like I went to a good, like I attended a good business school as well.
Wharton, right?
Yeah, I mean, I took classes there. I was in a different program there. But I don't think that like the classes were as updated, you know, as they should have been. I genuinely, because this is Wharton we are talking about, right? So I don't think other business schools are doing a much better job than Wharton and that, right? So I think that's where a huge opportunity lies. You know, there's this one joke and this may be offensive to a few people, but I'll still say it because I didn't come up with that joke. But I think there's a little bit of truth in it, which is that, you know, professor comes to somebody and says, I have 25 years of experience. And the person says, no, you don't have 25 years of experience. You have 1 year of experience 25 times over.
That is so true.
And that's where it falls apart.
So unless you're keeping yourself updated through like state-of-the-art research, working with students and this is what I think, like for example, a Stanford is brilliant at, right? Like professors are actively investing in their students. What Adam Grant did with you and your
absolutely,
Andy, for example, right? But that doesn't happen in India.
It doesn't even happen in the US beyond the top 5, top 10 schools.
I don't know a single founder in India who's been invested in by her or his professor.
Yeah.
Not a single one.
Probably not.
And that speaks volume. Right?
Yeah, and in the US, like a lot of professors angel invest.
Angel invest, then work with Rajiv Motwani is the best example.
Correct. And just mentorship, they don't even give money.
Yeah.
They just like work with the student.
And mentoring a student who's building a business or so on is not easy. It's not easy. So you're right, man. You're right.
But this, one thing you said about research, let's double click on that for a second. I think that was a very good point. You mentioned that if you do research as professors, then you're updated. Like, what is your expectation from a professor's research as a student?
That is useful for me when I learn from you on skills that I will need when I go into the world.
Okay, so when you were at IIM Lucknow, did you feel that any of the professors were using that research for your benefit?
I didn't even know the research.
So most of the professors' job is actually not teaching, it's research. Their incentives and whether they'll become deans and whether they'll get promoted and whether they'll get tenure depends on their research and not on the teaching outcomes. And this is true for schools across the world, chahe wo HBS ho, chahe wo IIM.
Correct. And my brother was an academic. He's now in a hedge fund. But I remember the tenure track
Such a huge thing.
Such a politicized thing. It's about how many conferences, about networking. It's about how much support you have by the gurus in the field. And he's a PhD from Stanford, IIT Bombay, kind of academic stellar record. But he felt he just was disillusioned a lot by the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're in a different rat race, which is not benefiting the student at all. So you want to do that research that will get published. You don't want to do that research
that is useful
to the student. Right? And the entire reason that academic institutions were built around teaching and research was so that the teachers would use their research to teach the students. But that is not happening.
So the research is becoming an end and not a mean.
Yeah, the research is its own parallel track that never intersects in the student's life. You were at IIM Lucknow, it's a great school.
Yeah.
Why aren't the professors using their research for your benefit? You are the one paying their salaries. Sorry.
Yeah.
They're doing their own little thing. So that to me is not right. That has to change in universities across the world. That has to change. Right? And it's very hard for institutions that are titanics in nature to shift direction. It's not going to happen. So it comes down to us to challenge that.
It's very interesting.
I think that's where Harvard and Masters Union will look very different in 10, 15 years.
So it will be research driven, but more practical research?
More consultative research. I want my professors to work with companies and help those companies in whatever way they can. So my marketing professor actually consults with some small brands.
And learns also.
And learns. Many of my masters are actually CMOs of marketing companies. So that works out well.
Yeah.
But even my full-time faculty, I have some full-time faculty.
So you told me that you send them outside for 50% of the time and so on.
So Bhupesh is a very interesting story. So and people can LinkedIn search him. Bhupesh Manoran is actually an IIM Calcutta MBA and an IIM Calcutta PhD.
Okay.
Very few MBAs actually end up doing their PhDs, but he did, right? Because he was passionate about teaching. Then he came to us at Masters Union and we were his first job. He spent 6 months in Switzerland, teaching there, working with companies there, and 6 months at Masters Union, and we pay his salary for the entire duration.
Okay.
Right? And when he comes to Masters Union, he of course teaches his course, but he also works with all the students on their projects, on their assignments, on their VI venturization program, on their YouTube channels, all of that, right? And in the very first year, he actually worked with a team called 8.network,
okay,
which was somewhat like a clubhouse, but Hindi and vernacular and all of that, right? And still doing really well. Those kids were slightly disillusioned because placements were coming up, but they wanted to continue doing this project full time. So Bhupesh, out of his own pocket, without telling us, gave those 3 students, 3 co-founders, I think a lakh each.
Really?
Please sit out of placements and just continue building your startup. मुझे बाद में वापस दे देना.
Really?
Yeah. I never got to know that. And then later I realized he had done that. And when the startup started doing well and they raised like 100K and then they raised 2 million, they recently raised 2 million from Venture Highway and all of these. Yeah.
What's the startup?
It's called 8.network.
Sorry. Okay.
8.network. Huh?
Okay.
So it's like the clubhouse thing I was saying.
Correct.
So raised from Venture Highway, raised from a bunch of angels. And then Bhupesh converted his debt into equity. And he's sitting on like a good amount of equity. I think professors have a great opportunity to become angel investors. You see the brilliance first.
Correct. And you have the most luxury of time, the highest luxury of time to evaluate and nurture it and change it all.
You see the journey. Yeah, VCs our journey dekhte hain. Over 3 meetings.
Correct.
This you're actually teaching the student, you actually know how he's grasping, how he's, battling his heartaches. Let's say he had a breakup.
Correct.
You have seen the student through all of that. You have the most amount of data points. So now we're trying to come up with a system where we want to empower our faculty. We want to give them money that, hey, listen, if you invest in students, we will match that. So I want to spend money on that kind of research. That kind of concept. I think that adds more value to students directly.
For sure. If you keep student outcomes at the very, very core of your reason to exist, that everything which educational institutions do can actually come down to real attributable results for your students.
That's the idea, yeah.
Why the name Masters Union?
I think we didn't put too much thought into this, to be honest, and we had to launch and we thought, okay, let's just use a holding name and we'll change the name later, and it never changed. But Masters Union is just a union of masters and masters coming together to teach.
But it's amazing that your institute does not have an attendance, exams, grade. I mean, very limited
in a very
amount
innocent
of-
way.
That kind of turns the entire competitive exam and the education rigmarole that we have faced going through school and so on its head, right?
See, education is one industry that has not changed in 5,000 years. Someone came up with this concept that someone will sit in front of 60 students, and for whatever reason, it's 60 students across the world. Who came up with this number 60? I don't know.
Correct. That's the ideal classroom.
That's the ideal classroom size. I don't know how, but sure. Right, so someone would come and stand in front of 60 students, deliver a lecture, again, 45 minutes, 90 minutes. I don't know who came up with these numbers.
Yeah.
Right, but they've been just followed blindly. They'll deliver something, and students will be tested on whatever has been delivered 3 to 4 months from now, because that's the size of the term usually.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Across the world. And we just accept these design principles blindly.
Correct.
We don't question them at all.
Correct.
So why is that? So we sat down before we started Masters Union, and we said, hey, listen, let's look at education from first principles. Right? Let's look at how human brains actually learn. And let's work backwards from there. Right? This 4-month term thing makes absolutely zero sense, or 5-month term, jo bhi hota hai, makes absolutely zero sense. Because students will not remember anything for 4 months. So at the time of the exam, they will not remember what was taught in the beginning unless they sit down with a book and start cramming or whatever. Right? They will not. And if they do not apply their learnings, their theoretical learnings in real life, it will not stick.
Correct.
They'll remember it till their exam. They will forget it 2 years later when they have to join a company and apply that. They will. It's a very inefficient way to learn.
Correct.
So I think learning models are so inefficient, and it's clearly written. You can see that the students in the back of the class are sleeping. When you turn a blind eye as a teacher because you don't want to embarrass yourself. And that is so sad.
Correct.
You always look at the first 2-3 students who are answering all of your questions to get your validation that you've done your job.
Correct.
That's crime.
I agree.
You schedule classes sometimes at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. or whatever, 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. after lunch, when you know that the mental capacity to absorb information is actually low. Even scheduling has to be done scientifically.
That is so true. And if I think about education, a lot of what you're saying, I go back to my teachers actually solve for the smartest kids in the class, while they should actually be solving for
The lowest common denominator.
the lowest common denominator. But they don't, because incentives are not aligned that way.
And
Incentives are how many toppers can you create?
Yeah.
How many people can you crack in the top 100 ranks at IIT?
Yeah.
So any IIT JEE coaching class is just focusing on that one child who will be in the top 10 or top 100. And the child who's ranked 4,000, but if you put in the effort, can come to 1,000, that delta and that impact is a lot higher. But because that 1,000 is not going to come on the front of a newspaper, the teacher is just not incentivized to.
Another thing, I think education is considered to be a content problem. That somehow this content has to be transferred from me, the teacher, to you, the student. It's seen as a content problem, right? It's actually not a content problem. It's a motivation problem.
Say more.
Students are not all equally motivated to learn. So you don't have to teach the students as a teacher. You have to motivate them to reflect, to investigate, and to learn themselves. That should be the role of the teacher. As I said in the beginning, I think student is a candle. You have to light the candle. Student is not an empty vessel in which you have to fill your, syllabus.
Correct.
But that's what education is today. We have to look at it from a motivation problem. So how can you motivate a student to learn accounting by himself or herself? Right? So one experiment we tried was actually with branding. And I think I spoke to you about this when we met last. And I showed you the video as well.
Yeah.
In branding, what we did was we gave students 10,000 rupees. We said, hey, listen, take these 10,000 rupees, go to Banjara market and buy some stuff. Right? Come back to campus, create a new brand in real time, make it look nice and valuable, then go back to Cyber Hub and sell that product for a profit. Okay? Students know that this is going to be the assignment at the end of the term. Now they are motivated themselves to make sure that they learn so that they can win that challenge.
Yeah. So they'll think about the brand, they'll think about what they want to do, what the pricing is, and so on.
What we do is we make them take an exam that they're scared of and not excited for. The tyranny of the exams. Learning will never happen if there's an exam at the end.
Correct.
There has to be a challenge at the end. that they want to solve. फिर वो अपने आप learn कर लेंगे. Teacher class में ना भी आए, वो सीख लेगा बच्चा. We have seen this. We see this day in and day out. Don't teach them. Excite them. They will learn themselves. Education is not a content problem. It's a motivation problem.
That is really interesting. And I think everyone in the education ecosystem actually thinks it's a most efficient way of transferring content from one person to the other. That's where all the focus is going, including research.
EdTech is just that, right? Like asynchronous videos, videos. Why nahi dekhni videos? That's why the completion rate in EdTech companies is less than 20%, 30%. Because they're not solving for motivation.
But motivation is a much harder problem to solve.
Very hard.
I kind of think about, for example, I think about the arts. I think about my tabla teacher, for example. I learned for 4-5 years and then dropped off because of college. So my motivation tanked. I was fairly good at it. And I was fairly good, regular, practiced well. But I remember in those 5 years, there were some kids who kind of, their progress in the instrument skyrocketed because they were just motivated for some reason. In our case, it was to impress the Guruji. Ki I can play more and more complex things with more and more ease.
That was the outcome.
And his shabashi was everything. And you're absolutely right that Sachin's entire career has been built on impressing Mr. Rachtekar. I will not get out for 2 hours so I can get a shabashi from him. And it's such an important thing because it's never about, I don't think Sachin's prolific batting skills actually came from as much from the teaching of Mr. Rachtekar as much as the motivation from him.
Absolutely, there you go.
But very few people are able to crack the motivation problem.
Yeah, I mean,
there's only one Sachin, right?
Yeah, I have a guitar teacher. I'm trying to learn the guitar.
Okay.
My guitar teacher told me that most of his students are people who have just had a breakup. And they are motivated to learn the guitar so they can impress a girl. Like literally, like he told me that. Like you need a reason to learn something.
Yeah. Whatever the reason, that's fine.
Whatever the reason is.
How long has it been that you've been learning the guitar?
Now 2 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's sizable. So you will be fairly.
No, I'm not that regular.
Okay.
And I'm trying to learn vocals as well.
Okay.
So it's hard. It's hard to, but I can hold a small crowd together, I think.
Oh, really?
I think so. I
would love to be a part of
Let's jam. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I have a tabla now. So, like, I've gotten.
Are you regular?
Yeah. I practice for half an hour every other day.
Every other day, morning, evening?
Morning.
Nice. Alone or with a coach?
Alone.
Nice.
I learn from my teacher. In fact, my current teacher.
What motivates you now to learn?
I genuinely believe that the art of, like, the act of playing the tabla for 30 minutes energizes me during the day, which in a way that a workout cannot, that a walk cannot, for sure. Like any morning activity, meditation, though I just cannot do. I've tried, there are multiple of those videos and all.
Yeah.
My mind is just too wild, right? It just cannot stay. So like, what's the best way for my mind to stay on one thing is to play the tabla. I learned it as a kid. It's something I'm fairly good at and want to get better at. So 2 things, right? One is it gives me a great day. 2 is I now am pursuing excellence with a very long-term view. I'm like, when I'm 50, I need to be a top 100 tabla player in the country.
Interesting.
Okay? I need to be able to perform in Savai Gandharva, which is like a classical music. So I have 14 years to get there. And I'm already 6 years in practice, right? So I have 20 years, which is not like, is whatever, 7,000 days. So I will probably get in 3,000 to 4,000 hours. So I may not be an expert, but I can definitely be an accompanist.
Absolutely.
So that's the aim. So that was a long-term one.
Just changing gears a little bit, I noticed this goal setting that by 50 you want to be a top 50,
top 100,
top 100 player. I also saw a goal in front of your office when I entered, which is that IPO thing, right? So this goal setting is something I think that comes naturally to you. Can you talk a little bit about that? That's super exciting.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I think I do feel that direction is important in life. Whether it's for an organization, whether it's for an individual, whether it's for a sporting team. Do you watch football?
No, not really.
Okay, so if you follow professional football in Europe, the coaching style, so the coach is the most important person in a football institution, more than the players. The coaching style has gone from winning games to winning seasons, and now it has become 5-year projects. So Pep Guardiola, now Eric Ten Hag at United, Jurgen Klopp, the best coaches in the world think in 5-year projects, where even players are dispensable. So they have to manage the club economics, they have to buy and sell players, and have a strategy that makes sure that the team is getting better and better and better. And now sport is so scientifically driven that you're able to measure everything of a player. So a lot of your decisions are kind of very bottom up. But I feel that creates the best football games today. So the quality of football today versus 10 years back is vastly different. Like a mid-table team in England today would have beaten the 2012 champions.
Interesting. Okay.
Like, so the quality of the game has gone up. So I believe that if you are able to think in 5-year horizons, you're able to up the game, even though, and it's the simple magic of compounding. But if you don't have that
direction,
then you don't know what you're aiming for, and then it's just haywire a little bit. So personally, for me, I always wanted to set goals. Like I remember even as a child, I did not clear the JEE. I have spoken about it quite a bit, right? After that, I felt like those 2 years preparing for the JEE, I was just completely haywire. And I felt like that was not the right process. So the process involves a goal, and the goal cannot be immediate. Like the milestone can be immediate, the goal has to be long term. So now I've tried to kind of
make that part of like who you are as a...
So then every small thing that I do in the process feeds into the end goal in some small way. So even the diet thing, for example. So I believe that if I'm able to take care of my metabolic rate and muscle mass over the next 4-5 years, I will have a great life post 60. I read some book somewhere where someone's like the author said in fact I saw a video of David Goggins and Joe Rogan.
Okay.
Where David Goggins said that what you do with your body from till age 30, your body can take whatever. No problem. Age 30 to 40 is where it is absolutely critical for you to take clinical care of your body.
Vulnerable.
Yeah. If you don't, 40 onward, you'll start getting injured. You'll start seeing an ankle break. You'll start seeing a ligament tear. And 50 onward, you'll start seeing cardiovascular stress and so on, right? But 30 to 40, if you're able to build out amazing muscle, strength, cardio endurance, then your life, then 40 to 60, you won't get injured. And 60 onwards, your life quality is a lot better. So this diet thing, for example, it sounds horrible and painful, but for me, it is a small milestone in my larger goal to kind of stay healthy. So yeah, I think I'm hope.
Yeah. Even, we have observed since we have had this goal of top 10.
Right? Yeah, you got a very clearly goal to it.
Yeah, so like my entire team would know exactly what it is that they're gunning towards. And everyone's own goals or KPIs are aligned to that top 10. Right? And even if you ask like my office help, कि भाई क्या कर रहे हैं यहाँ पे, वो भी ये बोलेगा सर top 10 बनाना है. And even students have joined us in that mission. Right? So students themselves also are like, okay, what do we have to do to get this to top 10? They own it as much as we do. Wow. And so, and I never did this before, by the way, and this happened to me accidentally. We didn't do this, okay, chalo goal karte hain ताकि हर कोई align हो जाए. We did this because, it sounded good and it made sense.
Yeah.
And we thought we could do it, but now it has transformed the culture of the organization.
It's amazing how that happens, right? That if you're able to fund, the goal has to be realistic, time-bound, right?
Correct.
But if it is that, and you start seeing early wins, in your case, the first batch, the 28.2 lakhs, that 50% is like kind of covered for, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, fuck, now I have my foot on the throat.
हो सकता है.
Now I'll press it. You're right? I think, like everything else, that's also a motivation problem. But in the case of a motivation problem, the first win is 50% of the job.
Yeah.
in a century, that's what they say, right? When I think Sachin said this, or Ganguly said it in an interview. When I scored a century, my first boundary was important. Like, that's when I knew that the gear had shifted.
हो जाएगा.
It was never about the nervous 90s or the 50. It was always the first boundary, because that gave you the confidence to build it.
Yeah.
Talk about entrepreneurship, Pratham, for you. Like, it's been 10 years at the earlier company, and now at Master Junior, like you're in your fourth year now. Has it been humbling? Has it been exciting? You always seem to be someone who's just incredibly high on energy, always happy. It was exhausting to do that constantly, especially given you're facing students a lot and so on.
I think, like, yesterday I was having this conversation with somebody that, I think insecure people make for ambitious people. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it was also in the Elon Musk documentary where he talks about how he was such an insecure kid and he always wanted to validate himself, get validation from his parents, and that's why he worked hard and that's why he tried to do all that. So I think for me...
Again, a motivation problem, right?
Again, a motivation problem.
I think that's the theme of today. Yeah.
But I think, like, for me, it started like there. In high school, when I had just joined, and it was a very good high school, it's called the Doon School.
Are you a DOSCO?
Yeah, I'm a DOSCO, yeah.
Oh, wow, very good.
Yeah. Now the negative comments will start on this video.
People don't like DOSCO?
For some reason, I think there's a little bit of a...
Is it considered to be an arrogant place?
I think it is, yeah. I think it's going to be a snooty place. It's going to be an elitist place. It's considered to be a Congress place.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because like Rajiv Gandhi went there, and then like a bunch of his, like Mani Shankar Iyer went there.
Oh, really?
And so I think some BJP guy like at some point said that, oh, like, ye to Doon School ki sarkar hai. And tab se, like, we have been termed as this elite. So,
wow.
So I just say it's school in Dehradun.
Okay.
Kidding. Very proud of Doon School. So in Doon School, I came from a very small city called Jalandhar.
Correct.
Right. And everyone else came from Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore. Spoke very good English.
City kid. Is it a boys' school?
It's a boys' school.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's another thing.
Oh.
We'll get to that. And I think I was deeply insecure because my English wasn't good.
Oh.
I had the Katora cut. And everyone else had like long hair and all of that stuff. And I think I was deeply insecure throughout my high school.
And you went there at what age?
Class 8.
Wow. So this is when you're at your most vulnerable. You're also like kind of adulting, but not really.
I think you're building a personality. And my personality was built around deep insecurity. I was always afraid. I could never like speak out in a class. I would always think, yeah, what if my English khich jati hai? To main kya karunga? I was very deeply insecure. And I think then it was about, how do I get over my insecurity? Now I have to do something cool, something crazy to get everyone's attention, to prove myself. Like, you have that underdog wala feeling, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's when I found swimming as my anchor.
Did you swim before, dude?
No, I did not. I learned it in swimming, in school.
Okay.
And I was good at it. And I realized I'm getting good at this, and let me hold this as my anchor, and I'll build my confidence around swimming. So even though I was still not a very good English speaker, I still wasn't very good at academics. I still wasn't, doing well at sport, the cooler sports like, hockey and cricket and soccer. I wasn't very good at that. But swimming became my anchor. I built my confidence because of swimming. Okay. And
it's amazing how sport does that, right?
Yeah.
It's absolutely
You
amazing.
get that initial win. And then
the sport, like, it makes you competitive.
Right.
It makes you goal oriented.
Right.
I'm sure you would be measuring your like time a lot as a competitive swimmer. In football, for example, which is a sport I used to play, it taught a lot of, like, if you did swimming relays, it teaches teamwork, it teaches like brotherhood.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a huge way.
The winning together is a different feeling.
I think for me, what I learned on the football pitch is probably the most important things I apply at running the company, probably more than what I learned at McKinsey or at business school and so on. But sorry, you were saying?
No, so this continued for me in college as well. So when I went to college, I went to an American university where now as an Indian, I was deeply insecure.
Again?
Yeah, again. Because there were these like beef eating, American boys, and they were like bulky and of course like they looked better and I had like pimples and also girls wanted to look at me. And I needed something to prove myself. I had this yearning that, what is going to be my anchor? What am I looking for? And so I I think, went to a hackathon, like a startup weekend kind of a thing, right? And I did well there, and I won that startup competition, and I'd gone to Princeton to do that.
Okay.
And I remember my picture came in the magazine, the college magazine, and then कुछ तो किसी लड़की से attention मिल गई होगी या कुछ तो मतलब उसके बाद हुआ था that I was like, okay, this could be my anchor. Genuinely, I held on to it, and then I was like, okay, let me just build more on this. Let me double down. I went for another hackathon, and I tried to enroll into the venture initiation program at Penn. I got through that. I think I got more attention. I started getting recognized a little bit. And so I think for me, entrepreneurship was a way to make myself secure. I think that's the honest truth. And I've thought deeply about it a little bit.
That is amazing. And you have the confidence and self-assurance to actually admit it as openly as you have, which is enduring enough.
And even now, like when I, go on Instagram, when I post something, right, and let's say like, Forbes covered us or something happened, it feels good. And so even right now, a lot of the motivation for me personally comes from getting validation from other people. I don't think it's about money. I don't think it's about anything else other than getting my parents' validation. Whenever some article comes about us, I'll first send it to mom and dad. And unless they give a thumbs up, like in their own, parental way in the group, something is like waiting inside of me to get that.
Wow.
I really think my sense of entrepreneurship comes from there.
From validation
from people around me, especially my dad. My dad's been an entrepreneur as well.
Correct. And talk about that. Like talk about that.
So, Bania family, and my granddad used to run a sweets shop.
Okay.
So literally like sell sweets like laddu, peda, barfi, right? All of that in Jalandhar.
How you look like this after you come from a family that used to have sell laddus? Is crazy.
The dealer never snorts his own.
That is true.
That's true. So my granddad did that, and then my dad decided not to join my granddad's business and start on his own. So he started in automobile, and
in
Jalandhar, right? So he became a Bajaj dealer, and it's a very interesting small story. I'll tell you. It's actually you might enjoy it. So my dad was a Bajaj dealer, and to become a Bajaj dealer, you have to apply for a dealership.
Correct.
Right, and all the dealership decisions are taken at the top at Rahul Bajaj level.
Correct.
Right, no more. So Rahul Bajaj interviewed my dad.
Really?
And asked him a question, Kian, why should I give you a dealership in Jalandhar? You have no money to invest in the dealership because you'll have to buy land, build building, all of that. You don't come from any experience. You're a young chap.
How old was your dad?
My dad was 25, 26.
Wow, okay.
Right. And I had this other person who I can give the dealership to. And that other person, interestingly, was Sunil Mittal.
Really?
We used to be from Ludhiana.
Oh, wow.
And so he also had an opportunity because I think he already had automobile business. He had a generator business, I think.
Correct.
So he was also in line for getting a Bajaj dealership in Jalandhar. This is a story I've heard.
So Jalandhar and Ludhiana are like twin cities?
Twin cities, yeah, close by. And so my dad answered that, hey, listen, because I've been born and brought up in the sweets business, I know every household in Jalandhar. I know exactly what their paying capacity is. I know exactly how much money they spent at their son's wedding 2 weeks ago. I know the demographics, and I can
better than
anybody else. And I can probably, do much better targeting when we have to go sell Chetak at that time. Right. And so somehow, by like a complete stroke of luck, my dad actually got that dealership, which was very uncharacteristic of Bajaj to give a dealership to a complete novice. Doesn't happen. So then that built up his business interests in automobile. And then he got into education. So he wanted, because he had, made his, not fortune, but made his money in that business, in automobiles, he wanted to do something for the local Jalandhar community that had supported him, that had bought his vehicles for 10 years.
Correct.
And
was your grandfather involved in the Bajaj dealership?
No, my dad, no.
My dad did it on his own, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
My dad has brothers, so together with his brothers, much older than him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. My dad is youngest of 6 right now and 8 at some point.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but of course he had the support of the family. And then he started with this small college called and the sweet shop is called Lovely Sweets. The automobile business is called Lovely Autos.
Really?
And he started a small college called International Institute of Management.
Okay.
And it was affiliated under a local government university. called Punjab University or Punjab Technical University.
PANJAB one, Punjab University.
No, this was Punjab Technical University.
PTU, okay.
PTU. You know PTU?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it was affiliated to PTU.
Okay.
And what happened was they started in 2001 and no students came. Like they came, but like not the best. Like our seats just got filled.
Okay.
And we were very surprised because we had a strong local brand, right? But then Dad realized, I've named my institution International Institute of Management. It should be Lovely Institute of Management. Because Lovely was a brand that was known in Jalandhar.
Correct.
And people associated with Lovely because, they would buy sweets during celebrations. So Lovely had a very positive sort of
Local presence.
And so then he changed the name to Lovely Institute of Management. And I think the next day the seats filled up in the second year. Like in one day, everything filled up. Because the brand was so strong locally. Even though Lovely as a name for an institution sounds horrific if you think about it.
To be very honest, I had no discernment at all. But whenever I would always think, how is this place going to become aspirational?
Yeah.
But I was not someone who had sweets at Lovely.
Perhaps.
So you know what? Like for me, if I knew, for example, and this comes back to our earlier point, that if you know the person behind the brand, then that becomes the brand more than the brand itself. So if there were people in Jalandhar who your father had given sweets to, or your grandfather had given sweets to when their 10th board and 12th board exams had come out, they would be very inclined to study in a place which they would.
Absolutely. That's exactly what happened. And then Lovely Institute of Management became Lovely Institute of Technology. Then eventually it became Lovely Professional University, LPU.
Correct.
And so I was born into that.
This is 2001, is it?
Yeah, this is 2001.
That's very recent.
Yeah. And the university only became a university in 2005.
So in 18 years, LPU has become like this gigantic.
No, actually LPU became gigantic in 6 years. We became, I think, 30,000 students in 6 years only. If I remember correctly, maybe I'm off a year here and there.
Incredible.
Yeah. Because at LPU also, we used a very similar playbook that we're using at Masters Union, focus on placements.
And how did your father do that?
At that time...
Was your mother involved in the business as well?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
At that time, and then she became very involved at the university.
Okay.
My mom used to teach, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Before LP was...
Before LP, during LIT, LIM.
Before
that. Before she was raising me.
Okay.
And my sister.
Okay.
But my mom was a MA in English.
Okay.
And so she started teaching business communications.
Okay.
Because, as a family business, at the end of the day, you'll help your husband in whatever you can. Mom started teaching, and she was a great teacher. And then she ended up joining the university full time. Now she runs a lot of the operations at the university.
Wow.
So her story is also very interesting. But LPU became, I think, the largest university in India in like 6-7 years. And that was only on the back of great placements. At that time, if you remember, this TCS and HCL and Infosys were becoming very large. And they were hiring kids, like tens of thousands of kids every year, right?
Correct.
And nobody had gone to these institutions, to these companies, and pitched them placements at their campus. And so LPU had that idea that let's go and pitch placements to HCL and to all of these companies and say, listen, why don't you come recruit
At Jalandhar?
We'll give you these 15,000 kids who we will train exactly in the same way that you need them to be trained in. Right? And so we worked backwards from what HCL and all of these companies were recruiting for. And that's why LPU became successful, even in a small town like Jalandhar, away from any airports.
And the promoter not having education background.
And so, in fact, the early team members at LPU were people who were not coming from education background. They thought differently. They were all coming from different sales, DAO background. And my dad himself was coming from, a Maruti and Bajaj background. And from a very process-driven and outcome-driven, right? Like Maruti used to have, these like goals and these sales targets and all that. And he brought that culture into LPU. Let's not look at institutions, like bureaucratic institutions or, legacy institutions. Let's look at them as organizations with goals and principles and targets, and let's go and achieve those targets. So LPU is incredibly high energy if you compare it to even an IIM. We are high energy. We target a very different segment, which is probably a mass premium segment and not the most premium segment that, let's say, SRCC or an IIM. But that mass premium market is actually where India is today.
Correct. So did a lot of that LPU, so very interestingly, so my father was in service for the longest time. So he was at TCS for almost 14, 15 years. Then he was at another information consulting firm in the US. So a lot of my childhood was in the US.
Right.
Then he was CEO at Tech Mahindra in India.
Correct.
So kind of had a father who was CEO. So I had like, kind of dinner table conversations were very interesting. My mom was always, of course, raising Yash and I was her primary job. Like a lot of our parents at that time, the mother took on that load. But in 2001, 2002, we quit his job as CEO at Tech Mahindra and started his own company called Airtight Networks. So I was in 9th, 10th standard. A lot of my formative entrepreneurship thinking actually was formed watching my dad whiteboard ideas, having early employee recruitment in our home. His co-founder was a professor of computer science at IIT Kanpur. There was a out-and-out tech business, but they sold it in 2019. So I saw that journey at least while I was home.
Full 0 to 100 journey.
Till my 12th, right? After that, it was kind of more distant, but it still, those 2-3 years played a big role in kind of making me feel that is something which is a very purposeful pursuit in life. Correct, right? Did that happen for you as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think just being from a Bania family, I think entrepreneurship is also somewhat in your genetics. And I think in our family, it was just like, I mean, it was never an option. Like you had to start your own company, your own business.
But joining them was ever a thing?
Yeah. So that was one of the calls I took early on, that do I want to work with my father in Jalandhar or do I want to build something in the US back in college when I had to decide, right? And for me, it was an easy decision because I didn't want to live in Jalandhar at the time. And so between New York and Jalandhar, what would you rather do? So I think for me, that was
But isn't like small town life great? Like in a way, like Jalandhar, like small town Punjab is beautiful.
Yeah.
Like the quality of food,
And maybe after 40, maybe after 35, but I think at 21, 22, I still had a lot of like partying left in me.
That is true. That is true.
So, and I thought I'd learn a lot more working on my company by myself.
In New York.
And my dad supported that. He actually never asked me to join him.
Okay.
And
are you the older of the siblings?
Yeah, I have a younger sister.
Okay.
Who also ended up starting up in college.
Okay.
And runs the company to this day.
So where did she study?
She went to NYU.
Okay.
And before that, she was in a boarding school in Dehradun as well.
Okay.
And so I think my dad pushed both of us to start up by ourselves because I think in his mind, and I can probably put the pieces together now, looking back, he said, जब तक ये खुद नहीं करेंगे ना, इनको काम की वैल्यू समझ नहीं आएगी. यदि अभी मेरे बिजनेस में आ गए, they come to my business right now, then ये अपनी रिस्पेक्ट नहीं बना पाएंगे. ये मतलब जो मेरी टीम है, इनको मेरा बेटा है, मेरी बेटी ही समझेगी. And that's why they'll never be able to make the most out of their lives. I think that's what my dad's logic was.
Sound.
I think that makes sense. So I in fact feel that parents who push their kids to join them very early on in their careers, I think it's almost a disservice.
Correct. That is very interesting. And is given that they are amongst the most successful education entrepreneurs in the country today, given how well LP was done, is there a pressure on you as you build out Masters Union to kind of live up, given of course that you talk about validation and so on? Is it your way to impress them?
I think so. I think subliminally I'm in a competition with my father. Like I mean I'm very comfortable admitting to that. We don't talk about it. But I think subliminally to hoga yaar. I mean like I'm sure we can, some clinical psychologist can probably like chart it.
इस point पे ऐसा हुआ था.
But I think कुछ तो मेरे को लगता है कि I'm trying to win his validation and I'm trying to. The other thing is that the expectations, right? I was born with a silver spoon. And so obviously the expectation from me is like 10x more, right? That I will surpass my dad and I'll do all of this. And my dad has been telling me this, then haan tu to karega. My mom has been telling me this. Everyone around me has been telling this. Ki, your name is Pratham and you have to be number one. All of that.
Correct.
So I think all of that breeds insecurity and all of that breeds ambition.
Do you feel like you don't get enough credit because you have a silver spoon in your mouth? You're born with a silver spoon. Like people always discount achievements, what you did with your first company, what you're doing now. It's fascinating. Like for me, but do you find whether it's potential investors, whether it's social circles, do they discount things? It's a given.
Yeah, no, बताते नहीं किसी को. I try not to talk about it. So in fact, if you think about it, you asked me how did Masters Union start? And the right answer should have been that I've seen my dad build a university. I wanted to build a university, but I did not answer it that way.
Even when I came to meet you,
Yeah.
I found it out at the very end when you were like, when you were walking me out of Masters Union.
So people don't look at me differently. I think.
But then no, after.
I think few people know. I think very few people know. Yeah, I think now we are. But that's okay. But I think like.
I think you should wear it with pride because.
I do. But I think I still don't want people to look at me differently and discount me.
Yeah.
Which will happen. It's just human to do that. So I don't try to hide it other than for this reason.
I think, for example, like also pop culturally, right? We paint second generation entrepreneurs, even if they're doing completely different things, in a weird way. Have you seen Succession?
I haven't, but I've seen the trailer.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Pop culture, like if you see kind of just the way the narratives are built, Star Kids, all of that.
Yeah.
You're like, there's no upside.
My family business professor at college used to say this, that the first generation builds it, the second generation grows it, and the third generation brings it down to the ground.
Yeah. It's called the third generation curse, no?
Okay, yeah, there you go. I just didn't want to be part of that curse.
Oh, wow. Interesting. No, but I think you've building something fascinating, man. I think education, it's very, it's rare to see a founder, and I think there is benefit to being a second time founder. This is your second gig.
Yeah.
Like Bania family and genetics.
That's the first gig.
That's first. Then your father doing something in your presence.
Yeah.
While you were in 9th, 10th, I'm assuming you would have been like in school
basically, yeah.
right? So you saw that happen. Then you did your, US startup, and now you've done this. So this is like culmination of 4th experience. But having said that, I think your understanding of education as a space is fascinating. We have had Pramath.
Yeah.
You guys have such similar names. My God, it's like
it's actually the same letters.
Yeah, it's just yeah. So I was like, so we had Pramath over who
and same college.
Oh yeah. He's also Penn.
He's also Penn. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So he kind of spoke about education through the lens of being a founding father at ISB and Ashoka and kind of doing all of that. But you've understood, like, your hold on the economics, your hold on what it takes to be, a high-performing school from the get-go, and your goal orientation is absolutely amazing. So, from like, just cheering you on from a distance.
I think we've learned from ISB. A lot of what we do is and a lot of what we are able to do is because ISB did it 20 years ago. And I think ISB was a much more ambitious and a much more structured experiment and ambition at the time. Like, at that time when ISB was started, it was India's first one-year MBA program.
Yeah.
Everyone was 2 years. MBA means 2 years. And for them to come and say, no, there's something
we can do in 1 year.
In 1 year.
And the practitioner approach and 8 semesters of 6 weeks. A lot of this was...
A lot of it was... So in fact, before starting Masters Union, the first meeting I took was with Mr. Sinha. And I went to his home and I just took notes about what he was saying. And literally that became the blueprint for Masters Union.
Wow.
He is also a founding father of Masters Union.
Wow. Does he come and teach as well?
No, he hasn't actually visited the campus yet.
You must. He will be fascinated. He's such a... He's like when he was here, we shot the episode for hours. Mm-hmm. And it was mesmerizing.
I've seen that episode.
Yeah, it was mesmerizing.
Properly, through and through. Yeah, no, he's the founding father of like the modern Indian education system.
Yeah.
And I've full credit to him. And I mean, what we are doing, the kind of disruption that they created, we are like 10% of that, right? I truly believe that. And that was at that time, in that Indian mindset, 2001, that mindset was a lot less startup-y and early adopter, and it was very, very rooted in tradition.
But to get India's top industrialists together to come into, you're right, they solve for placements, they solve for time, they solve for, education through amazing faculty. Yeah. I think they cracked you need to go to 35, 40 years of churning out alumni after alumni who are successful to kind of reach a place. They crunched all of that down into like the first year itself.
And they reached rank 11 globally within 10 years.
Really?
Yeah. ISB did that actually. So what my goal is not that crazy.
Wow.
ISB did it almost 12 years ago. I think in 2011, they were ranked 11.
Where are they now?
I think they're maybe like in their 30s or 40s, I think right now.
In B school, global B
In
school.
global B school rankings. So they reached 11. It's not that bad.
That's fascinating.
That's actually quite good.
That's fascinating. No, man, I think Pratham, thank you so much for coming on the barbershop, sharing your journey on education, on building the Masters Union. I think the clarity of thought you have is quite amazing. And what you have built, like, I'm hoping that we can do a barbershop episode on site for you guys. Like,
Yeah.
You know, I think we are looking at, I think with Saisha and Aditya, we're trying to look at different formats. So we might want to do something with your students. We might want to do something around entrepreneurship with younger kids. So we should definitely talk more about how to do that. But your personal journey, you know, pass my regards to your parents.
Absolutely.
And to your grandparents and, you know, for what they have built. But cheering you on from a very short distance, given that we are neighbors, we are. But thank you for coming here.
We'd love to have you come and teach as well. If not full 20-hour course, then at least a small module and talk about what you have built here.
No,
we were just talking about how, you know, your brand is so becoming ubiquitous now.
Yeah.
And the entire journey that, I mean, we should tease that as a case.
No, for sure. I will absolutely do it.
Yeah.
I think between me and Deepak and a couple of more folks here, we can actually tailor a, you know, digitally native brand, content marketing, FMCG, offline kind of 20-hour course. It will be divided maybe 5 hours with me, 5 hours with Deepak.
Oh yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
And do something which kind of, and then actually have the kids come here.
Yeah. And see it for themselves.
And do like a small project.
Yeah.
To kind of
Live the case.
Live the case.
Live the case. I mean, there are enough companies in a 1 mile radius. You can live like 50 cases just right here.
Absolutely.
No, but thanks so much for letting us.
I hope you had fun though.
No, of course. That's great snacks, great company.
No, this is a great conversation. Thank you so much,
Appreciate
Pratham. And folks, you should check out Masters Union. In fact, if there is one place we look at for amazing content inspiration, it's what you guys do. So
Likewise, right back at you.
Osmotic relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
All in all. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have something.
Oh, wow. Appreciate, yeah. Thank you so much.
This is for you.
I would
we have something for Prachi, but we'll have it.
Yeah, no, I'd love to accept it. Use all of it. Okay,
This is only for you.
Someday.